Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome David Gow to the Reboot Chronicles, who was the previous CEO of luxury e-commerce company Ashford, and now the CEO of Gow Media, the largest media company in Texas, with properties like SportsMap Radio Network, two ESPN stations, we'll talk about that, a lifestyle site, automotive, and a sports site for starters. David recently created a blank check company through a SPAC process with a NASDAQ IPO raising $100 million. Though quieting down now, SPACs have been all the rage, as many of you know, with over 850 of them taken public over the last 24 months. Most of them now are heads down, of course, shopping for and consolidating acquisitions, including David, who is looking to acquire something in and around some of the sports tech stuff we're going to talk about, but who knows, we'll find out. And I have a feeling he's just getting started. So David, thanks for coming on and congratulations, great start.
Oh, Dean, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you, by the way. Having taken a couple of companies public myself, I think about the same time you were. I feel your pleasure and your pressure that you have now. But maybe that's a good place to start without getting too geeky. Maybe for some of us that don't know what a SPAC is, a special acquisition type of platform. Maybe just give everyone a quick tutorial, and then we'll jump in how it's going for you.
You bet. So the normal way, the non-SPAC way that companies get public is there's an operating entity, there's a business, it grows up, it becomes large enough to then go public. And that, of course, means they list the company on NASDAQ and they raise a lot of capital in an IPO. In the SPAC world, it's backward. What we've done is we have created a hollow company, listed it with NASDAQ and raised a lot of capital. But now we've got to go find the operating business. And that's why it's often referred to, as you noted, a blank check company. We've been given over $100 million to go identify and acquire or merge with a great operating business. And then our focus, SPAC, of course, the acronym stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Corp. Our special purpose is sports tech. And so we're excited to go find a great opportunity in the realm of sports tech.
Yeah, I love sports tech. It's a great category. There's so much going on. We'll get into the trends in a little bit, but I'm on a couple private equity boards and stuff, and there's a ton of private equity capital out there just ready to rock and roll. But you kind of chose this special purpose acquisition company route. So why did you do that?
Well, when we stand in front of operating businesses and make the case to combine with our SPAC, we can bring to the table a lot of capital, which, as you noted, is available in the private equity realm. We can bring together a lot of capital. We can bring a board which has great expertise and I think can add value to a lot of the companies with whom we might combine. And then we can bring a public stock. And for some businesses, having a public stock creates a great currency for additional acquisitions. So we are an efficient, time-efficient, and cost-efficient way for a private entity to get to the public realm. Right.
Yeah, you've got you guys came on the market around 10 and you're holding there. Probably everyone's just waiting to see what your big move is. What was that process, having been through road shows, the crazy phases we used to call it, what was the process like for you guys?
Well, it is interesting because you and I were both doing IPOs in the late 90s, and back then it was planes, trains, and automobiles. This IPO that we completed in October for our SPAC was much different. All the roadshow visits were via Zoom. So I didn't go anywhere but this chair. And of course, we did about the same number of meetings to raise the same amount of capital, but it was far more convenient to do it from this one place.
Right. Yeah, that's both good and bad, I guess, but I'll look on the good side for that. And so now you've got a timer that says, I think most SPACs have 18 months, and it's focused, it's special purpose. So yours is sports, kind of sports tech, sports media, maybe to be a little bit broader. So as you're looking at things out there, what's your filter? How do you actually come up with a thesis to say this is this is kind of things we'll look at in terms of buying a company. Maybe these are the things we're not going to entertain, or is that even the right approach?
No, that's the right approach. And we did raise capital from IPO investors with a commitment to focus on sports tech. So that's the first thing that we think about. And the way we define sports tech broadly, it's the realm where technology is innovating the sports industry. And that's happening in a sweeping number of ways, but we've broken it down into 4 categories. One is esports, which is, of course, a techno sport. So certainly technology is influencing that sport, esport. The second category is health and wellness. So health and wellness includes all the software and hardware devices that are changing the way that people train, perform, coach, recover, monitor their health. Those are the wearable devices, businesses like Peloton, which is software and hardware. So that's health and wellness. The third is fan engagement. And so these are new media platforms, new ways of connecting fans to their sports. That might include smart stadium technologies. And then the fourth category is fantasy and gambling. And obviously technology is enabling people to play fantasy in more enhanced ways, and certainly to be able to make sports bets as the legalization takes place across the country.
Right. And so Gow Media, a little bit separate from this, but very interrelated, very focused on Texas. As you're looking at acquisitions, do they have to be in Texas?
No. So in Gow Media's case, Gow Media is a separate beast from our SPAC, but Gow Media is a multi-platform media company, and we have aspirations to take Gow Media into other locations outside of Texas. Right now, Gow Media includes some sports radio properties and a portfolio of digital content sites. And when we think about the digital content sites, we've got culturemap.com, sportsmap.com, innovationmap, and automotivemap.com. And we think there are opportunities to expand our content categories, sites like Outdoors Map, or to take the content sites we've got into new markets. And so our digital business is really very scalable.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've got a mixture of old media and new media products. And looking at some of them here, they're very much ad-based. And as you know, when you kind of look at a lot of the media models these days, especially the old media models, are under a lot of pressure. You look at Google and Facebook, racking up more than half of media ad revenue. It's interesting. You've got a mix, but as you look, to the future, I assume most of yours is ad-based now, or sponsor promotion, whatever you want to call it. You being an old e-commerce guy, are you thinking, hey, this is where I want to be in a few years with these properties and the ones I add, a mixture of, let's just call it e-commerce transactional or ad-based? Are you looking to balance that out, or what's the strategy?
We've done very well with capturing local ad spending in the markets where we have media platforms. So it is interesting. There's always lots of competition. Yeah. But when we look at, say, culturemap.com, which is our largest content site, and culturemap covers all things lifestyle, food, fun, festivals, art, music, society, travel. That's culturemap. And we've got locations, localized content sites in each of the 5 cities of Texas. Culturemap has competition. Culturemap has competition from people like Eater, which is a Vox Media property. Right. And Eater covers some of the same things we cover. But what Eater does not do is have local account executives knocking on the doors of local advertisers who want to reach their local community. And so we really have a distinct place in the landscape with our commitment to connecting to local advertisers and supporting their campaigns and their growth.
Yeah, I mean, Google's got all their local ad forces all around the world, but I would say the content around what to do locally, culturemap has more breadth and depth in the content side. So you're definitely building a content expertise media company, which kind of came and went for a while, and seems like they're coming back. So the hyper micro niche retailers love that. Brands love that. At Revive, or in the beauty tech space, where all these brands are trying to figure out, how do I geo-target people, and also how do I get a relationship with them? And a lot of it starts on sites like yours when they're trying to acquire customers, and different from managing the current customers they have. Do you find
Well, you're right. I
yourself as a
mean, the engagement level of our audience is really strong.
yeah,
And we see this online with consistent repeat visits and checking in on our content. And then we also see it offline because we hold a lot of local events. One of our best is called the Tastemakers event, and it's a celebration of food
that
in
sounds
the
fun.
cities of Texas. A celebration of food in Houston. We get all the best restaurants to come. We give out awards to the top restaurants, and it's a great recognition that Houston especially, but in all our markets, the restaurant community is very, very vibrant. I mean, there are things like celebrity chefs. The notion of a celebrity chef, that term didn't exist 8 to 10 years ago, but now we celebrate the celebrity chefs in our community and new restaurant concepts and really the diversity of offerings that the city has to offer.
Yeah, it makes you a good, definitely a good partner. When you look at some of your focus areas, esports in itself would just be enough. Massive industry, health and wellness, so many different tentacles there, from physical, mental, beauty, and others. Huge wearables and the data and analytics that go around that is to me almost a separate business. Fan engagement kind of ties in a lot, I think, into some of the current properties that you already have expertise in, and of course, gambling. Fantasy football type of rage. I can see why that's obviously a big deal in Texas. So, but so I get why you're hardcore on the strategy, because all of those are trending up into the right, and a lot of money chasing them too. Are there any key consumer trends that you're seeing that make you feel even better about those categories? Or are there other categories that you are curious about as you've been now in more of a SPAC buying mode?
Well, it is interesting in those 4 fronts in sports tech. There are literally billion-dollar industries developing before our eyes, and not just one, but several. Let's consider sports betting. As legalization takes place across the country, and it just seems inevitable that most states will be legal over the next 2 to 3 years, that's a huge new multi-billion-dollar industry.
They want that. They want that tax revenue.
They do. And then esports is an extraordinary opportunity in the sense that there's great growth. I mean, you probably know this, but there are over 500 collegiate institutions now offering scholarships for esports athletes. And so esports is an emerging category. Yeah, there are the business models in esports, the winning business models are still being defined and still being shaped and formed, but it's a monster category. Another billion-dollar industry that's coming up overnight will be this whole business around NIL, name, image, and likeness, the opportunity for collegiate athletes to monetize the brand, the following that they have as name athletes on their campus. And that's going to be a huge growth area. And there'll be business models that will develop around that. There'll be a digital platform that will become the eBay that connects brands with athletes. I mean, everybody knows the quarterback of Alabama, and he's going to get a big brand deal to monetize his name, image, and likeness. But what people might not know is the captain of the women's swim team at the University of Texas. Right. And there are brands that would love to align with her, and there needs to be a platform that connects those brands with athletes that are less known than the Alabama quarterback.
I like that. It's kind of the democratization of that. And that includes NFTs and all different types of things that they can monetize, maybe even on their own without
I didn't even get to NFTs, but you're absolutely right. When you consider that whole category, it's another huge area of growth in this realm called sports tech.
So back to the SPAC. I know Gow is separate, up and running, current properties. Everybody can go check them out. We'll have links to all of them in the article that goes with the podcast. But when you look at these categories that I just rattled off, and you rattled off, some of them are like B2B tech stuff to enable an industry. Others are consumer brand facing, very different business models, very different management expertise. Are you you leaning one way versus the other? Valuations used to be higher on the consumer side. Now it's depending on how many users you have. But now a lot of the SaaS tools, B2B tools, you talk about fan engagement, stuff like that, are doing quite well. So going back to the filter question, can you do both, or do you need to say, hey, this is going to be a consumer brand focused company in around sports tech, or this is going to be an enabling one that just works with partners?
At this stage in the process, we're looking at both the B2C, and there's more B2B entities that are providing the plumbing or the mechanics that are enabling lots of interactions with audiences. So no, we're wide open to both. There are some good business models in both categories.
They're compelling.
Our mission in life is, with the SPAC, is to find a target company with whom we can merge within an 18-month window. And given the time imperative and the excitement of sports tech, the large number of opportunities out there, at this point, we're still in the process of considering things on both B2C and B2B.
Yeah, it wasn't a trick question, but as I thought about it, it kind of sounded like a trick question. But it's like eyes wide open right now. I think strategy-wise, getting too geeky here for this isn't an M&A podcast or anything, but we do talk about it a lot. It is a major way for companies to grow, and so thanks for kind of bringing the veil down a little bit around the human side of the SPAC process. There is pressure, there is due diligence that is done right. It's it's not just I always thought the blank check verbiage was doing disservice to the category, because it's just another category, another way to put capital in the market to maybe give some founders of a company an exit or not. They can continue to run it as well. So I think categorically it's fascinating. But back to the B2B stuff, there's another organization that you're involved in that seems to tie into your innovation website a little bit, but so the Canon, this is incubator accelerator type of thing, pretty Texas focused, Houston. I'm on the one of the founders and board members of 1871. It's been awarded the largest business incubator in the world, some category that they always get every year. So anywhere to 400 to 500 startups, raised a couple $1 billion to these companies out of Chicago, very civic based. We've got a couple others, one that's called Matter that just focuses on health tech. Those companies have also raised billions, and another one called M-Hub that's all manufacturing based. And I just really always enjoyed going to Houston, because I used to go to the Johnson Space Center. Actually, it was only a couple of years ago, I was last there, and they work with other companies and help incubate things. There used to be an incubator there. They moved it back downtown, and it's so it seems like your timing's great in Houston. Not to make this too local, but the mission behind Canon, does it tie into what you're doing at all, or is it more just a kind of a side civic thing, like things that I do to help kind of grow the economy and something like that?
Yeah, the Canon is a really interesting property because, as you've noted, being a startup or being an early stage business is hard, and it requires a support infrastructure and a co-location of a bunch of resources. And that's what the Canon does. So the Canon is called the Canon because it launches things. It's a very, very, very large innovation hub here in the city of Houston. There are now other locations, but the foundational location is an old, large warehouse that's been turned into a cool, open office space. And
perfect.
There are probably 300 plus businesses, all co-located with a whole bunch of programs to help them launch and grow. So there's an angel network of investors, there's a mentor network, shared services, fractional CMOs and CFOs to help those businesses who couldn't afford a full-time employee, community building programs. When somebody gets a big VC round and that deal is closed, there's a champagne room where everybody goes and toasts that and celebrates that win. There are educational programs. So all these things have come together. And I think just the camaraderie of entrepreneurs next to entrepreneurs. I mean, we all know these entrepreneurial ventures, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. When things don't go well, you feel like you're done. And when things are going well, you feel like you're going to conquer the world. Well, it's helpful for entrepreneurs to be next to other entrepreneurs who are experiencing that same roller coaster ride. And so the Cannon has been a great location for many businesses here in Houston to get to the next step. And to your point, it does have a positive civic outcome in the sense that Houston itself is really focused on, well, there's an entity in town called Houston Exponential. How do we achieve the next wave of exponential growth in the city?
Yeah, it's a good group. Yep.
And one of the things the city is doing is trying to create innovation ecosystems, much like the Cannon. And there's another one called the Ion. And these are really supporting businesses get to the next step.
And does Gow Media, do you guys work out of the Cannon?
We do not.
Okay.
There happens to be right next to Gow Media, a second Cannon location. It's called the Cannon for Sports and Entertainment.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's why I had that association.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the locations or the Cannons will have a theme to them. The largest one, the largest Cannon location, the big warehouse I mentioned, that's sort of industry agnostic, but the one right next to us, because of our media assets, it made sense to make it the Cannon for Sports and Entertainment. And so there are some media businesses right next to us. There's some tech businesses there. And really, it's open to lots of different kinds of businesses, but it's helpful sometimes to get a collection of companies that are in the same space.
Oh, absolutely. No, you'll get a lot of, I mean, just a lot of that rub off effect, that connected tissue. You'll probably help them more than they're helping you on a given day, but you'll be surprised. I mean, Revive, our sponsor, we are in Chicago. So it's co-headquartered in Chicago and Helsinki. And so in Chicago, they're basically housed at a partner site of 1871, which is the Bosch Connectory, which is all IoT. So it is thematic versus 1871. It's a little more agnostic versus Matter, which is just med tech. This is all in the merchandise mart in Chicago. Big, locations, but the benefit for the founders and the employees to work out of there, I think, is so, or at least be close to it, is exponential rather than kind of being.
But you asked about, you asked about the connection between Gow Media's media property Innovation Map,
yes,
and what's going on over at the Cannon and other activities in the city. And the reason we started Innovation Map as another media platform was because we were seeing all the activities that were taking place in these innovation hubs, all the growth of those companies. And there was a feeling in the city that the stories needed to be told, that a media outlet, though the media outlet won't make the company successful, the media outlet can fan the flames, can support the growth and development of the business in this sense that if a company hits a milestone and the media covers it, that can attract additional attention to the company, maybe help recruit additional round of investors, maybe new customers that can enable then achieving the next milestone and more media coverage. And so it almost becomes a self-perpetuating cycle of success.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Chicago and Illinois have in common with Texas and Houston and Austin is that sense of civic pride. You don't get that much on the coast. Having lived in Silicon Valley a long time. On the coast, you just don't get, it's just too busy. It's just too much volume. It's not, and it wasn't as pivotal and critical to get this next generation of startups going over the last decade, which is when most of it's hit pretty hard. So it's good to see you, guys doing that. If you look at some of your other properties like SportsMap Radio, and you've got two old school, I mean, you need two sports talk radio stations in Houston. That's amazing. You own both of those.
Well, we do. We have ESPN with two signals at 97.5 FM and 92.5 FM. And actually, the reason we have the two is so that we simulcast the content, but so that we can reach the entire greater Houston area.
Okay.
One of the things about the city of Houston is it's so expansive now. We've had so much growth that there's almost not one radio signal that can cover all of what anybody wants to cover in Houston. So with the two signals combined, we can say that we have audiences east of Beaumont, west of Katy, north of Conroe, and south of Galveston. And so the combined reach is one of the market leading attributes of our property.
Don't forget the hill country, folks.
Yes,
we're losing half the audience. We're talking Texas geography. It's a separate country. It's a big place, bigger than most countries geographically. But okay, so there's simulcast. That makes sense to me now. And then SportsMap is more lifestyle, right? It's more talking about sports and not just watching it, I guess, right?
Right. So SportsMap Radio is a 24/7 set of shows talking sports We really don't do much play-by-play. And what happens with SportsMap Radio is we provide those shows to radio stations across the country. We also provide sports updates to radio stations across the country. And so we're a syndicator of sports content. And when we provide shows or content or updates to those stations, in return, we get ad time on those stations.
Yeah,
and so we have about 600 stations whom we're working with, and we can take ad time on 600 radio stations, go to a national media buyer, someone say in New York who might be buying for a big company like a Geico, and say, don't go buy 600 stations individually, buy a spot from us, and through our network, we can put that spot on 600 radio stations. It's one-stop shopping and it's network economics. It's a far more efficient way to reach the country.
Yeah, that's a nice flip of the syndication model. You're actually flipping it around. So does that mean you're building out a big national sales force too? That's not just local at that point. You've got to place spots.
Well, the national sales, we really lean on some rep firms, third-party entities that sell for us on a contingent basis, and primarily network radio buying is done out of New York. So that's the thrust of the efforts. We use rep firms in New York.
So when you look at Gow Media, you're kind of running a bunch of disparate sites. So what are some of your challenges you faced getting it to this point?
Well, it seems like there's always a different challenge. When we started,
every day,
we were, I mean, this is the nature of the business, right? But when we started, we were local sports radio, and then we added this national sports radio property, and we were enjoying and doing well as a sports radio property. You know, that was, I mean, that goes back to 2010, 2011. And then when we were looking at the landscape, ad dollars were shifting from old media into new media pretty radically. And so the challenge was, how do we develop digital assets, digital audiences just as fast as possible? And how do we make the shift from being sports radio to more multi-platform? And anyway,
different culture, different expertise, you had to change everything there.
Right. And the foundation of it was we made an acquisition. We bought a property called CultureMap. We didn't build CultureMap, we bought it. Smart. CultureMap had been around for 10 years. Yep. CultureMap had localized sites in the 5 cities of Texas. So that was the foundation on which we've been able to build a digital business and add these other content sites that look and feel a lot like CultureMap, but obviously are committed to different topics.
Yeah. Who doesn't like talking about events and food and things like that? And then automobiles, why automobiles? Is that just a tie into sports and leisure and food and cigars and all that stuff that you always see a lot of those sites intermingled, especially targeted at men and things like that?
Yeah, the way we think about our content sites is, so right now we have the 4 content sites under a common map brand. And what we like to say about them is, look, we're not going to deal with heavy, difficult, sometimes mean-spirited political discussions. Our content sites tap into the passions of our audiences. People are passionate about food and restaurants, sports, innovation, and yes, auto. There's a whole community that love and think about cars just as they think about restaurants and their sports teams. So that's what's exciting about auto, and that's what can be exciting about Outdoors Map when we get to launching Outdoors Map. Hiking, biking, fishing, camping, all those things are deep passions for our audiences.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left. I want to thank you for joining us, but that's why I asked. It ties into one of your key trends. So when you're looking at picking up a property in health and wellness, what excites you about that category?
Oh, I think when we look at health and wellness, that everybody's enjoying being educated on what lifestyle habits they have, how it affects their business and affects their health. And so, yes, health and wellness is a really exciting category with lots of growth in our SPAC realm.
Yeah, and the any subcategories that health, beauty, wellness, skin, supplements, equipment. Any favorites of yours, or and how should people reach out to you if they've got ideas for as you're going through this process?
Well, let me give you my email, because yes, if there are companies that fit, and we have to buy a big company in the sort of size range we're talking about, is an entity with an enterprise value of around 150 to 200 million at the floor. and about 800 million at the ceiling. But
So
I'd love to get ideas.
We'll stick your email in the comments and stuff. It'll be there.
Wonderful.
It's really great. Anybody, there are still some SPACs coming up. Any quick final thoughts and advice about people going to go through that process?
Oh, I think it's still a great opportunity. If we can do our SPAC 1 well, I think we'll go do a second SPAC as well.
Yeah. Well said. So those of you thinking about doing it, it's always good to reach out to people who've done it like David, even if you're just part of it or employee of one. And there's 849 others that have gone out in the last 24 months. So it's always good timing. David, thanks for joining us. You've been listening to David Gow, who is the CEO of Gow Media, and now a new SPAC company that will be launched soon. So stay tuned for that. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.